So, at first he tries to deny ever acting like he was educated, which is bullshit, because in the comment section of a video not addressed to me where he said, where it was entitled Weak Atheism, I'll say, he informed me that he went to college to learn Latin.
Golly gee willikers, if only I had thought to include an explanation of this in my denial of my claims that I was ever educated. Oh, but I did. Now that one really is my bad, the Latin thing. See, you were going on and on and on and on. I mean, anybody can look at the comments in his video if you'd like, about how he's read so much philosophy, and I thought, hey, maybe if I reflect some of this douchebaggery back at him, he will recognize it and how repugnant it is, and then perhaps modify his own behavior, and that was stupid of me. I am a stupid, stupid man, okay? But, hey, to my credit, I haven't done that since, so I do have some basic capacity to learn. Wait just a second. Didn't I just admit to being wrong? If I admit to being in the wrong and then you keep harping on it like an old fucking woman, aren't you really just being a complete and total asshole?
In the comment section of one of the video responses he made to me, he declared, once complete rationality kind of agreed with him on a point. He said, "You got two college-educated guys telling you you're wrong. So either you're lying, Snake, or you're a schizophrenic. Those are your options. Which is it?"
Please refer to my previous comment on reflected douchebaggery.
Anyway, he also denies that he ever said that he had 2 PhDs and that I shouldn't listen to Cardinal Virtues and the Skeptical Heretic about him claiming to have two PhDs, but to be honest, all he's doing is playing in all of your word against mine game. Yes, in
your word against mine? Well, son, I do believe that this is the information age, and I also believe that all of the interactions that occur here on YouTube are recorded in some fashion. So, if any of this shit actually fucking happened, it seems like you might be able to produce a single solitary shred of evidence at some point. It's not my word against theirs, it's their bullshit that they can't back up with some evidence that should be readily available to them. I guess that's that's a little bit more wordy, but that's the gist of it.
He was trying to create a hypothetical situation in which he could draw parallels between food preparation and God worship, where he was literally making things up.
As opposed to figuratively making things up, I suppose.
He then tried to defend what he said in the Creation Liberty video, where he completely fucked up and contradicted his own criticisms by saying, "I recall that I said you were saying he wanted to use the common dictionary and I wanted to use the Mega Stanford, blah, 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 whatever." No, Snake, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you brought up Socrates. Remember that particular point? You were talking about how the good thing about Socrates, the reason he was so popular, was because he could put things in terms that everyone could understand, draw in the public. He didn't have to use highfalutin philosophy, which you love to say, and everybody understood what he was saying. That's what you were saying was the good part about Socrates. He had an appeal to the public eye. Yet, the complete opposite is apparently, in your opinion, the good thing about Beelzebub, that he says things that nobody fucking understands.
The difference being that Beelzebub has never at any point claimed to either be a philosopher or have any knowledge of philosophy whatsoever. And the precise opposite is true of you. So it seems like as a philosopher in the never-ending search for wisdom and understanding, seems like the onus is upon you to find the common language to speak, doesn't it? Because you, loving philosophy, touting philosophy, being well-versed in philosophical concepts and the general form of philosophy, that's on you, man. You don't see Beelzebub going, "Man, I know these things about philosophy. I mean, I studied Kierkegaard and Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Nietzsche, and man, I know the whole works of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, even though his shit was shitty." You never hear Beelzebub saying that stuff, so no, it is not up to him to figure out how to get another person to understand shit, because he is not a self-reputed expert in the search for fucking, what was it you said, wisdom, what the fuck ever. But anyway, bragging is not free. When you brag about shit, it also gives you a responsibility.
And you're trying to mock me for being, as you say, "Look at me, I know big words." Yet you appear to be praising Beelzy for being all, "Look at me, I can be deep and poetic." You're inconsistent, so LOL.
No, my primary thesis is, as it has always been and is fully supported by all 3 examples that have been given so far, that you're a douchebag. And you're a lot more interested in, I don't know, demonstrating your intellectual superiority or whatever, than actually, I don't know, discussing the issues in a rational and fair way. I'll get to this later with an example.
I know your insecurities and inferiority complex make you think that you can read minds and understand the intent behind my words, but I'm sad to say you're not a mind reader. I'm so sorry to break it to you.
Inferiority complex? Is that your diagnosis, doctor? I mean, because I can think of a few more that might fit a little better, like narcissistic personality disorder, or, I don't know, being a sociopath, or, and this one's probably the most likely of all, maybe I just don't take myself so fucking seriously every single second of the day. And wait a second, if you actually discuss things with a psychologist, and I do suggest you talk to a psychologist, not just to confirm this, but for other reasons, they'll tell you that having a sense of humor about things is one of the most accurate indicators of mental health. Yeah, so if people are just too serious all the time, they're usually just a little mentally compromised or profoundly stupid. I'm just throwing that out there while we're just throwing out psychiatric evaluations.
After complimenting me on my impression of him, he abandons Billsy and throws him under the bus by saying, I don't need Billsy for this point, when I said that you need to get into the mind of the person to criticize him, which of course glosses over the point that I was making in my video, that he was attempting to defend Billsy, and I was pointing out that he actually wasn't proving a damn thing Billsy ever said, and he was just making shit up to put Billsy on a pedestal. Anyway, he then declares, feelings have nothing to do with reality. On heroin, I feel like I'm king of the world, like I know everything. Well, yes and no, Snake. Feelings have a lot to do with reality, which is why on heroin, if you feel like you're the king of the world, you're going to act like you're the king of the world.
No, because a remotely rational, insane person, even under the influence of drugs, can say, hey, perhaps these feelings are not an indication that I am, in fact, some sort of god and the king of the world and know everything. Perhaps this is a manifestation of the fucking heroin I just tried. That's kind of the sane person's conclusion, not, I think I don't go walk around naked in the streets and everybody will worship me, la-di-da.
Same with reality without drugs. Whatever you feel is true colors how you act.
It does not, however, color external objective reality, the shit that everybody else is perceiving.
This exact point was made a long time ago by Blaise Pascal, where he criticized people like Rene Descartes for thinking that they could demonstrate that a god existed with an intellectual brain. And by the by, if you want to say, oh, another philosopher, probably another wrist-flapping dum-dum, like you like to say.
Well, I never said that those great minds that you refer to were wrist-flapping dum-dums. I'm saying that's you, because what you do is you just take the ideas of great men and use them to bludgeon others without actually understanding what they're saying. More to the point, even if I did feel that about philosophers, since Pascal wholly agrees with what I'm saying, I'm going to have to give him a pass.
He then mocked me, saying that he has no evidence for Billsy's thoughts by saying I have no evidence that he ever claimed to be a scientist of any sort, despite the fact that near the end of the last video he actually said the words. The physicist in me wants to tell you that philosophy is all bullshit. Whatever.
Well, I remember trying to explain to you how everyone has an inner physicist, and you were like, please demonstrate that assertion with evidence. Because you don't understand metaphors, but why don't we just go to the clip? See, this would be a great opportunity for me to explain the multiple personas within a single identity type of theory here, okay? See, I, as a compassionate individual, want to inform you at this point that, hey, buddy, just so you know, for your own good, you're kind of coming off like a pretentious douchebag. As a physicist, I want to say, hey, did you know that philosophy, it's not as cool as you think it is? And so from this, if this is why you are saying that I'm claiming to be a physicist, you would also, by extension, have to say that I'm claiming to be a compassionate individual. Now, do I seem like I'm going to claim to be a compassionate individual? Yes, stupid motherfucker. And FYI, the entire world is governed by the laws of physics, so everybody must have an inner physicist, since physicists study physics, and look, there's physics fucking everywhere. There's some physics here, I mean, you just can't get away from this shit. So, oh, and I remember I commented on that in the comments section, and you're all like, physicists have PhDs, even though that's demonstrably fucking untrue. I don't think Sir Isaac Newton had a PhD, since that particular title didn't fucking exist back then, so, I mean, obviously you're a big pile of shit. I mean, you're full of shit.
But yeah, you never indicated you were saying you were a scientist, right? Yeah. And never mind the fact that you invented Billsy being aware of all my arguments, elevating his arguments way above where they were up to now, because, I don't know, you felt like trying to make him smart to seem to get at me or something? You were trying to get...
Well, with such a coherent analysis, I'm going to have to concede the point. You're totally right on that one.
Already have known about several of the perfectly valid points that you skipped in my last video and in this video.
Well, man, that bastard was 23 minutes long even when I did skip stuff. You know, I don't have all fucking day for this stuff, but I'll tell you what. I will respond to each and every one of your points lucidly and logically and coherently with so much supporting evidence. And you will just be amazed. Unless, of course, at the end of this video you start bitching about the length of my last video and then, like, turn it into some sort of succinctness contest, in which case I'm just gonna continue to mock you like I always do.
Because, for some reason, you just don't like me.
So you're saying you don't know why a person might not like you? Yes, it's just, one of those mysteries.
After I laughed at the prospect that Snake was a postmodernist, he declared that I was just declaring an ad hominem attack without explaining why all interpretations are not valid. despite the fact that in my video, right after I made that accusation, I gave an example of an interpretation that we can all agree would be less likely to be true than a metaphorical one. The funny part about that is that he played me doing that exactly. So he accused me of just labeling his position without addressing it with an argument, then played me addressing it with an argument. That's how much of an epic failure this guy is.
Well, if you'll forgive me for using some highfalutin language, that whole Copernicus writing the Bible, the 1500 space aliens thing is kind of an a priori assertion that makes up part of the heuristic framework used for said interpretation. But it is not itself an interpretation, much the same way that you can't drive your car to your car or write on a pencil with itself. The tools used for the interpretation, the preconception that colors the interpretation, is not itself a part of the interpretation. It is what guides the interpretation, it directs the interpretation, but it is not in any way a product of interpretation. And as an addendum, as much as I love to insult your intelligence and lack of knowledge, I think that you know every single thing that I just fucking said, you dishonest pile of shit.
Anyhow, when I brought up the interpretation through the eyes of someone who believes that Galileo invented the Bible to promote space alien belief, he said, that wouldn't be an interpretation of the Bible. Yes, it would be, Snake. Someone would read all the words looking for references to space aliens. God would become a space alien. Angels would become space aliens. The heavens would be space. The difference in interpretation is pretty simple to grasp.
Wait, so you're saying before they even read it, they would have this conclusion in their mind? But isn't interpretation the drawing of conclusions after reading something? Order of operations, motherfucker. Do you know it?
Well, yeah. In fact, history directly controverts a biblical literalist readings, too.
And once again, you have confused interpreting history and interpreting the Bible. See, remember when I said interpretation? You look at it and you say, what is this trying to say? And why is it saying it? Well, the literal interpretation is just the person who was writing this intended it literally. It doesn't actually mean that it has to conform to factual reality, just how it was intended. That's the whole thing about interpretation, because the people who wrote this were, of course, constrained by the limitations of their own knowledge, so they may well have intended it quite literally without it actually having any kind of conformance to actual factual reality.
You don't seem to mind that when you declare that all interpretations are equally valid and that Beelzebub's literalist interpretation is just as valid as all the others, despite the fact that historical facts go against biblical literalism. That scientific facts go against biblical literalism. You don't care about that then. But when I bring up this other guy who was trying to reinterpret history a little bit in order to reinterpret the Bible, that's completely different.
Well, since the reinterpretation of history comes logically prior to and therefore beyond the scope of the biblical interpretation, I'm going to say, yeah, they are a little different.
When I pointed out that he was against Billsy, again, in the case of talking to the characteristics of people and ignoring that they're talking to the whole person, he simply mocked me and called me one-dimensional, said, I can do two things at once. Well, when those two things at once contradict themselves...
I believe you mean contradict each other, and I didn't say I could do two things well. In fact, the example I gave was I like to text while driving.
Moving on, he tries to equate asking for a demonstration of how something can be logically true with declaring that something cannot be logically justified. Well, Snake...
I didn't equate them. I said something like, hey, this is obviously my way of saying, why don't you explain this logically, motherfucker? And then, I said it in a challenging voice, so now I'm gnosising. Whatever, man. The obvious logical refutation for that statement of gnosis is the logic that I say doesn't exist. Not some stupid fucking obfuscation.
Those aren't the same thing. Excuse me, but if you declare in a rather shouty voice, that cannot be logically justified, and I take that as a claim of gnosis, I think I'm justified in doing that.
Well, yeah, you're perfectly justified in saying that if you just want to be a pedantic fucking know-it-all instead of actually talk about the subject we're talking about. If you want to go off on a little fucking tangent with your gnosis and how it just offends the sensibilities of discourse to make such a statement instead of just responding to the obvious intention of the statement, which is, hey, motherfucker, provide me some logic for this shot.
Also, I already provide the logical justification for the stance that I have, that not all interpretations are logically are equally valid. And I defended that several times in this video, in my last video, in my debate with Beelzebub. So again, for you to ask me for that is just demonstration that you don't actually listen.
Oh no, I listened. I explained how it was shit once. I explained how it's shit in greater detail in this one, so hopefully this time you'll fucking listen.
In an effort to save his inkblot analogy, Snake says that the point of the analogy was so that he could give 3 completely dissimilar interpretations, and 2 of the 4 are similar to each other. I don't understand how that's analogous to the point that you were trying to say, i.e. that multiple interpretations delineates the intrinsic value of the thing being interpreted, because regardless, there will still be those closer to others getting it right.
And my point was, there is no close, there is no meaning. What's the meaning? Hey, why don't you listen to those 4 different examples I gave of what people saw, and why don't you tell me what was intended by the guy who made the ink blot? Oh yeah, actually it was just a guy that spilled some fucking ink on some fucking paper. Do you see my point now? Do you get it? You have no fucking idea whether there was any intention behind that, let alone what it fucking was, let alone who got closest.
That's the point. There can be good interpretations and bad interpretations. You just demonstrate it with your own analogy. Good job, you self-refuting clown.
Oh really? That analogy just showed how one interpretation is better than the other? Then tell me, Mr. Lundy, which interpretation... In fact, why don't you take the 4 interpretations and rank them on a scale of 1 to 4 from the best to the worst? Why don't you do that for me? Tell me which one is better in this analogy. Oh wait, you can't, because you have no fucking clue what, if anything, was intended when the ink blot was made.
No, Snake, I know exactly what you said. You said that they were all equally valid. Of course, if you want to say neither are more logically valid than the other, I can disprove that rather simply by pointing out that biblical literalism cannot be literal in its interpretation of the Bible. Literalism refutes itself because there is no such thing as literalism.
I learned the word from you. I mean, you sure waste a lot of people's fucking time talking about shit that doesn't exist.
Assumptions are made time and again through a literalist interpretation. Meanwhile, if you're looking at the Bible metaphorically, assumptions are perfectly fine to make because it's just a bunch of stories. So that makes non-literalism a little more logically valid than literalism.
And there you go. With the literal interpretation, you go in there with assumptions, and you read the words, and then you draw conclusions, and the assumptions color them. In the case of literalism, these assumptions are that these, these words have been translated correctly, and they were intended to mean what the words mean, and there's no larger context of meaning, that it's actually transcribing events as they were perceived to happen. These are sort of the assumptions that you make with literalism. The assumptions you make with a metaphorical interpretation is that there is a deeper meaning, that these stories are meant to convey a greater point, etc. Both are interpreting using different criteria, but because both are interpretations and both rely upon assumptions, which may or may not be true, Gödel's theorem, then they are equally valid from a logical standpoint.
He then repeats himself by saying that I was saying Bill Bob's literalist interpretation is less valid because the minority opinion. Well, Snake, since every other time you felt it necessary to show me saying something that you're refuting, and this time you're just saying that's what I said, I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit, you dishonest little turnip farmer. You then go on a bit more about the Christian God under your interpretation being X, Y, and Z, but my response to all of those is the same every time. Minority interpretation. You then explained, under my interpretation, a Christian would kill a baby if ordered, which is fine because your interpretation is the minority across the world. Thanks, honest little turnip farmer. And finally, he declares that his position is that he knows nothing, yet I know less, which confirms my suspicion that he has a superiority complex.
Oh, so it's a superiority complex now. Aren't you the one that's always gassing on about fucking consistency and that? Before you say it's inferior, now it's a superiority complex. Well, which one is it? Are you just making shit up? Because that's what it feels like.
Insists that he knows more than me about things, and that I simply think that I know more than I do. Nope. Sorry, Snake. Everything I know I can back up. Can you?
Actually, I can. Remember, I said I know nothing. Watch me back it up.
Doubtful. And by the way, as far as me being succinct, this video is about 9 minutes shorter than yours.
Oh, snap. Well, looks like you win the succinctness contest, even cutting out a great number of my incredibly lucid and well-supported refutations of your points. I'm still way over 20 minutes or whatever. You win. This is going to be the last video I make toward Mr. Lundy, because, good God, it's kind of starting to get tedious. Well, TTFN.